the setup, I think
Oh yeah,
from 49, I think, which was, so it was just a couple of years earlier by Robert Wise, who
so good.
did that. But yeah, no, it's like it's a very useful thing for the film, where he gets to spend just like 80 minutes reckoning with the town by going conversation to conversation and learning the history, meeting the people, and it does naturally kind of bake in so much tension. And we'll talk about it a little bit later, but there's a montage near the end of this that both times I've always been floored by, where it just the climax of it is just the train whistle and an empty chair. And both times you're like, oh, fuck, that empty chair, goddamn. And it's one of those things where it's like, it's good filmmaking craft, and, it's showing you something that should not be scary or powerful. And it is. And it's because of, purely through the cinematic language and through the way the information is kind of slowly doled out to you through all these conversations that he has, filled with just like kind of this like resigned regret to it. The only thing that's always held me back just maybe like a tiny bit from like masterpiece status on this film is the fact that it's it gets a little, and I don't love using this term, but it gets a little lectury in my experience, where it's just some of it is meant to be just a tiny bit functional, if that makes sense. Like there's stuff to me that they're where I did sort of understand what sort of like Howard Hawks kind of meant, not politically, just in terms of some of the filmmaking. Like this movie is a kind of movie that really likes to kind of state its themes, and you can feel him kind of mechanically hitting character to character who each serve a very functional purpose of being like, and there is some complexity in there, but it's not to the level of like the character personality hangout poetry that you'll find in like a Hawks movie. And it doesn't quite have the same levels of like lyrical beauty for the genre and affection for the genre that you'll find in like a John Ford film. It's not quite as doomed and depressed as like the revisionists would get with, when they would really get that kind of realist and that social realism kind of element into some of the narrative qualities of the film. And I think that's just because of the time it was coming out. Like it's a very sturdy, handsome studio lot Western with some ideas that are a little bit more left leaning than you would usually maybe see in a studio lot Western. And, as a result, part of me watches this and I do go, it's hitting its civics class marks, but it is hitting them very competently. And like, that's kind of, just what's always ended up kind of working for me about the film, even if just like the level of longing and tragedy in the film just isn't quite like, I don't know, My Darling Clementine is like a movie I'd compare this to. And like that movie like almost makes me weep. And this one, I don't know, it's just never quite had that effect on me, but it's very solid. The actors are very good. And it does have a very effective and tight formal approach, which you basically get like right from the very beginning when it opens on that first shot, which, by the way, I have to credit the film on this. If this alone, it would be a good movie. The first ever shot of Lee Van Cleef.
Hell yeah.
Thank you. Everyone who did it. He's the first shot of the movie. He's not in the movie very much, but he's the silent gunslinger. No, he doesn't say anything, but he's the silent gunslinger named Jack Colby. It's his debut film, first time he was ever put on camera. He would go on to have an incredible sort of like B-movie and Western career that he would become an icon of, obviously, the spaghetti Western film in two of the best Eastwood and Leone Dollars trilogy movies, and Sergio Solima's The Big Gun Down, which we've also covered on the show and is really fucking good. And he's so good in that. He's awesome. Not as much chest hair going on, exposed chest hair going on in this one, but he's looking cool. He's smoking on a stump. He's playing his harmonica,
Yeah. It's awesome. And it's so like, I love that it's all set up through silence, which is what you get through the majority of the movie with the villains, you actually learn a lot more about them through other people than themselves, which is kind of
through
cool.
like the town rumor mill a little bit.
Yeah, because really what you do with them, anytime the camera goes to them, including this intro, is like they're all just kind of gathering together under these like couple trees, and then they ride off into the town. But even after they ride off into the town and they set themselves up next to the train station and the tracks, whenever they go back to them, they're just kind of like hanging out, asking if the train's on time. Like they're not really doing much. You don't get to know them through their perspective. You get to know them through everyone else's, and I thought that was really cool and interesting.
Yeah, it's like a little bit less tense version of like the opening of Once Upon a Time in the West, when you just get all those guys, those grubby dudes like sitting around waiting for the one train to pull up, and then they're going to get into the fight that they're going to get in. You're kind of wondering like what the fuck is happening here, but you know that violence is impending. It's sort of similar to that, but just like with a little, Leone has a very specific kind of screw tightening atmosphere that I don't think this film quite has, at least in its opening, where he's meeting up with the posse who's going to greet the film's central antagonist, the vengeful criminal outlaw cowboy Frank Miller, played by Ian McDonald, and Lee Van Cleef is hanging out with a man named Jim Pierce, played by Robert J. Wilk, and his brother Ben Miller, played by Sheb Woolley. While I will say the Oscar-winning radio hit theme song describes the plot that you're about to see, which is maybe the most like classical Western gesture in the whole thing, where totally. God, what a song, the just do not forsake Frank me, Miller. Oh my darling,
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's
every time I've watched this film, I end up kind of singing along with it at a certain point, because even the motif kind of carries even when the lyric is not there. And I'm like, yeah, do not forsake me, oh my darling.